So we'll kind of jump in. So my name is Beaudry. I'm here with Austin and Shane. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of go. We have a bunch of developers with us, a bunch of Rockstar developers, kind of special and everything. So let's just kind of go through and let's kind of introduce ourselves. Austin, let's start with you and tell us kind of who you are. Obviously, our listeners probably already know who you are, but let's go ahead and start with you and kind of what you specialize in.
Cool. So my name's Austin. Again, most of you probably know who I am, but what I specialize in specifically is iOS development. I've been doing iOS development for quite a while now, and that's basically me.
Cool. And I'm just going to go by my grid view of who's next. So I know you guys' grid might be different, but I'm going to go next, Drew. So let's introduce you, Drew. Tell us who you are and what you do.
My name is Drew. I'm a mobile software engineer for iOS.
Okay. Jesse?
All right. I'm a front-end dev, mostly work in React and JavaScript, and do a little bit of design stuff too.
Perfect. Marcus, tell us about yourself.
Hi, my name is Marcus. I am currently a full stack developer doing web development, hopped from mobile development to web development.
All right, Jaden.
Hey all, my name is Jaden Paddock. I specialize in iOS development when I develop, but I've been spending more time in full stack back-end work lately.
And then Richard.
Hey guys, my name is Richard. I'm the quality assurance guy. So I jump around different projects, conducting different test cases and making sure that our product has high quality for the client. So that's me.
Perfect. Okay, so we have a little bit of everything here. I would agree with me, Shane, on that. I think we got front end, we got back end, we got web, we got everything. So here's the deal. A lot of our founders don't know what we're talking about when we say front end, when we say back end, when we say web, when we say, mobile. That one's pretty easy. I think everybody knows how mobile. So let's start with Jaden. Jaden, can you give us a quick rundown of what you think the difference, or how would you explain the difference to someone who is not technically sound when it comes to these different type of developers? Why can't you guys all just do everything?
Actually, Beaudry, why don't we ask it this way? What if we say, hey, I want to build Uber. Who's going to do what? Yeah. Who's going to manage which part of it? So Drew, I'm building Uber. I have an unlimited budget. Which part of the process do you do?
I would handle the app end of it. So what the actual user is seeing, and I would be communicating with the back end in order to do that. So it's everything the user sees.
So specifically on the iPhone app, what they would actually pull up. Okay. And you could do all the little bells and whistles of the street view and the where's my driver and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah. Notifications, maps, all that stuff.
Right on. Jesse, which part would you do?
Assuming that there's a web app. I'm not sure if there is currently.
There's unlimited budget. So of course there's a web
there's why not, right?
Yeah. So then the web app would actually be built to kind of mimic the iOS app. And if there's an unlimited budget, then I would expect all the functionality of the mobile app to also be in the web app, but it won't function as natively as it would as device specific apps as for like Android or iOS. So that can be a little tricky with notifications.
So thinking on Uber specifically, it would be, so just so people know, so if they pull up Drew, they pull up your fancy iPhone app and they're pulling up their ride, what would be some of the cases where an iPhone app would have a web app interface? What would be some of the things that people might not think about on Uber? Because I've never called an Uber from my computer, right? But I'm sure there's a million web apps for that.
I would say that you can also use a web app on your phone. If Uber had a web app, you could pull it up in the browser on your device, and it would work the exact same way.
Nice. So our Uber, you could actually order a car without even having to have the app installed. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's a lot of apps out there that work like that. So,
Marcus, which part would you do?
Probably be deeper in the back end, looking at APIs, trying to build out an API, because it's one of the things a lot of people forget is you want to allow other applications to use your device in the scheme of things. So you want them to be able to call it, be like, let's say wallet app, I want to pay through that. How do we do that? Or hey, we add some functionality on top of Google Maps and somebody wants to use that. How do we ensure that someone is able to use that and doesn't get confused in the process?
Nice. Jaden, which part would you do?
I think I'd probably be working with Marcus here and figuring out the back end, making sure the API is secured and safe, and make sure we get all the information to the right place at the right time. So a lot of it is dissemination of information, making sure people have what they need whether that's location of a car, how long it's going to be till it gets to you, map information, all that stuff. So
just to clarify with what both of you guys said, you would be doing a whole bunch of stuff that the customer would never see, right? So there's a mountain of code that would have to happen for the app to actually work, but that the customer would never even know exists, right?
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. You'll see the data, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be pretty coming to you. That's what other people do.
Backend guys don't get enough credit, just so everybody knows. They do so much work and they should be given all of the credit.
I have a brother that's a backend developer, and I had him explain to me a million times. I was like, do you or do you not build robots? I don't know. But I was like, can you explain? He's like, here's the deal. This is how backend developers are. For a sports analogy, we are the linemen. We are blocking and we are holding the line to make sure the quarterback has time to throw the football to the receiver, who is the front end, who catches and gets all the glory. But the back end guys really are the ones doing all the work and holding off the line, making sure everything works. But everybody on the front end makes it look like they're like the rock stars, and everything looks really pretty and acts really well. And so, that's what I've heard. I don't know if that's true. You guys can attest to that or not. I mean, it's really, I don't know. Jesse, you kind of, or Jaden, you kind of got a smile on your face. I don't know if that's true or not, but
it's a fun analogy. I hadn't heard it before, but I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Now, but here's the deal, Richard. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? So how do we know? How do we test it? What is your process on? Let's say we build this app. How do we get the bugs out? What is your process in the whole series?
So to start off, we usually put our user hat and try to think as a user, because there's many different things that we overlook as developers and assume that the customer knows how everything should work. We just got to make sure that first the front end looks good, and then that there's like a really good communication between the front end and back end, making sure that the app doesn't crash, and making sure that the application meets the client's requirements, and that the flow are as smooth as possible. So
really, so you have our front end, we have our back end, and they put it together, but you kind of go in behind it and make sure everything's connected, everything's flowing really well, make sure things aren't broken. Would you say that's kind of what your main goal is?
Exactly.
Huh. So if I was a dev, I would just have to block your email, and then I would never have you adding stuff to my task list. Is that what I should do if I'm a dev?
Yeah.
You're just like, this is broken. This needs to be fixed. This needs to happen. Yeah. Austin, what are you building? What are you building on our Uber app?
Oh man, I don't know. At this point, I'm just the guy that puts out fires. I'd be along there trying to chug along with Drew. So just whipping out features as fast as I can on the front end.
But Austin, I would say that you also play. So we hear what like a project manager. Is that someone that kind of makes sure everything's flowing, or is that more of a product manager? What's the difference?
That's a really good question. And I think every company defines each one of those roles a little bit different. So I would say my take on it, a product manager or a project manager just manages the project to make sure that tasks are getting done. But a product owner, I feel like, is more like innovating, trying to figure out how to make a specific feature better. There's going to be a product owner over the person that handles, requesting a ride, or a product owner over the person that deals with support. So that's basically how I would distinguish the difference between a project manager who actually gets the stuff out, make sure the developers have everything they need, whereas a product owner is more like innovating, making sure that they're hitting the company visions.
So a question I have on our Uber app is, we have 8 people on this grid. Obviously everyone here is super talented, can do really does really well what they do. Do we have enough to actually build Uber from scratch, or who are we missing? Who's not on this call that would have to be on here to build Uber?
I think just a designer. I think that's the only thing that's missing on this call. Or other than that, I think we have everything. Let's do it.
Okay, perfect. Today. Shane, you're gonna bankroll this, right? You're good with that?
Yep, unlimited budget. Here we go.
So just so, and we don't have a designer on here, but Drew, maybe go into that a little bit. What, as developers, why is a designer important for you guys?
Oh, it's super important because we've obviously got to know what we're going to build, and having good designs in place that are decided on, that have gone through, all of the stakeholders who are involved in that kind of thing, and it's agreed upon. Once we have that, then we can get to work and we can put all that in place, and makes our job super easy, because we just know, okay, this pixel needs to go there, that pixel needs to go there, and we can just run with it. So
these are the color codes that need to go here. It's almost like, would you say, a blueprint to an architecture of a house? You need to have that before you can really build it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've worked on projects where the designs kind of evolve as you're working on it, and it does make it a little bit more difficult because you've put stuff in place, and then now you got to go back and got to change it. And if that happens over and over, it definitely like adds time to the project and makes things a little more difficult.
Which budget comes in play there too, right? Like, okay,
yeah.
although design says we should do this, we don't have the budget to do this. We need to possibly cut corners here or pull this feature out. So then you have to think differently than other than what it looks like. It sounds.
Yeah.
Have either of you had to build something without a design file, and what was that like?
Do you mean like just like templates for us to just kind of fill in, or?
Yeah, I just mean like, how often do clients come to you and say, hey, will you build this? Go start. Because at that point, you're having to go in and design it and figure it out and on your own. I'm sure that everybody here has kind of experienced something like that. Just kind of built something without any guidance.
Like, how often have you talked to a client and they're like, hey, I really like the look of the masterclass app. Can you just make ours look like that?
I mean, there's certain instances where we'll get stuff from like, say, what are some of the just template websites where you just kind of drag and drop stuff? We'll get stuff like that sometimes. We get some freedom there, which is good and bad, depending on how you look at it. I think it's good because it gets to flex those design muscles, but it can also be bad because the client come back and be like, they were seen. So there's a toss up there. I wouldn't say it happens with a specific client 100%. I would say there's definitely cases where there is some points where there is occasions where they're like, oh, just make it like this. But I've never really experienced a client that specifically is like rebuild Uber and just name it something different and call it good. So yeah.
So here's actually a question, kind of a follow up with that. Do you guys like? I feel like as a I'm a non-technical person, but I kind of know what I like and I have vision for different things that I might want to build or whatnot. But I feel like sometimes when you're working with a really talented team, you feel like, hey, if I give too much direction, am I going to make everybody mad? Like, is it going to be frustrating to work on my project because it's too specific? Or if you don't give enough direction, then you're off wondering, well, hey, I don't even know what this should say. What's kind of the balance there? Do you guys like having a lot of direction in your apps, a lot of things really specified, a lot of things clear, or do you like having it be more free? And what's kind of the line where it turns into like, okay, now you're just micromanaging my code? What's the line there? What's the sweet spot?
I think from my perspective, at least, you'd be surprised how many conversations are going to come down the road in the process of building this app. So the more you can bring from the beginning, the better. I don't think I've found a project that has come with too much to start the conversation. I don't know how that would even happen, but essentially it means you're avoiding as many conversations as possible that will waste time in the future. So the more you can come with, the more design files you can bring. That way we can have that conversation now and say, hey, you're trying to build this thing that's really expensive compared to this other feature. Should we maybe push that out to a future build? And having those conversations now versus, you mentioned like making it not fun to work on your project. Well, I would say I would rather work on your project, right, than work on our project. Our idea of what you might want is probably not going to give you exactly what you're looking for. So the more you can detail what you're actually looking for, the happier I think any client would be.
Jesse, you've worked in design and you've kind of been on both sides of this coin. Tell me where do you feel like that line is? Because Jaden talked about like, I like it when there's a lot because this is yours, it's not mine, right? It's kind of, but like, at what point do you feel like you like to flex those creative muscles and sometimes feel micromanaged?
More is better. More is better for sure. You mentioned building a house earlier, and I think that's like a pretty good example because, like, let's say we're building this house on a small plot of land. If you say, hey, this house is going to take up the whole plot of land, but then you realize you don't have the money to build a house that big, you can always cut stuff off. But it's a lot harder to add stuff on later. Because let's say we're building this house and we laid out all the plumbing and all the electricity, but then they want to add like a whole nother room. It's like, all right, building the room's not the problem. Running the electricity to it is the problem. And then that gets twice as expensive as it would have been in the very beginning. So I think that line is like, the client's going to tell you what they want. And then but there's a lot of education that you have to give back to the client on how that's actually going to be built. So it's much better if everything's there and then you have like a foundation to stand on and say, hey, I like where your head's at. I like the design. This is what it's going to cost you. And I can tell you up front.
What would be too much direction? And your guys, have you ever worked on a project where you had too much direction? Someone's too overbearing?
I don't think it's possible to get too much detail. I think it's more the thing that could be too much is too much changing of the detail.
Yeah, I want to hit on that because I feel like I might be like a little bit opposite. So Drew, I think you nailed that, just too much detail in the sense of like, I'll work on projects or talk with clients and they are just so anal about like where a button is. I'm like, you understand me moving this button for the next 15 or 30 minutes with you has costed you like $100, right? Like, do you really care about where this button is? And so it's like super funny. So I think when clients are pushing more for the aesthetic of the app and not focusing on the overall experience of the app, that's when I think it's too much. So I think we should be evolving the project, like the feature set, not evolving the aesthetics as much. A designer, if you were here, he'd probably tell me to shut up. So
yeah, that's why we don't have one.
It's like a 50-50 toss up.
So what would you guys say is your ideal client, right? So if you could paint a picture of an ideal client that you're just like, oh man, this was a dream to work with. What were some of their features and what did they have ready for you guys when it kind of comes to that perfect client?
Someone with a budget.
Yeah, an unlimited budget, right? Be like, no constraints.
So if they have budget and a pulse, Austin's in.
Jaden, I think you'd be a really good person to answer this.
I'm trying to think about, what would make it perfect. I know some of our ideal clients have definitely come with an idea, right? So they've taken the initiative to write something down or draw something out, and even freehand. That's something we can have a conversation about. But it's that initiative to say, more so than I have this brilliant idea that's going to make $1 gazillion. How cheap can you build it for? It's more along the lines of, hey, I have a realistic idea. This is kind of what I'm looking for. This is what I want the experience to be like. What do you think? Or what are your thoughts? And being open to that feedback from someone who's potentially done it quite a few more times than they have. I think that's always very valuable.
So let me add on to that a little bit and ask, do you guys only get stoked about ideas where you love the idea? Like, let's say you're really bought in and you really believe the app, or have you been equally as excited to work on projects where you maybe didn't resonate with the idea or it wasn't for you, but the founder just really had their ducks in a row and was really organized and you thought, oh, this is going to be a cool project, even though I don't like the app? What's the balance there?
The ideal person in my head to work with is somebody who has like their ducks in a row and has thought like about the idea for a long time, has sketched stuff out, has done research. There are very few people that I've talked to who have put in that work to know what they're building, who they're talking to, and not been able to get me excited about their product.
So it's more their excitement and their direction makes it kind of fun as you for a developer.
Yeah, because I mean, like, and it's super funny. Like Boja, I think we experience this all the time. We'll jump on a call and we'll be like, oh man, like after the first call, we'll be like, dude, I don't know how I feel about that idea. We jump on a second call with them and get like their true like vision for the product. And it's like, how can they've done so much more research on the market that they know people are going to use the product. And for me as a developer, I just want to be building things that is actually going to be used. I think that is the most important thing to me as a developer. I don't want to be working on something that nobody's ever going to touch in the future. I don't care how much money you have. If one person is going to use it, go find somebody else to build it.
Yeah, I'd agree.
You guys gain enjoyment out of knowing that people are going to be using something that you build. Would you guys all agree with that? That's pretty cool.
So then knowing that, like what are the hot button triggers to try to, if somebody's, pitching you on, hey, here's why you should come work on my app, here's why you should come join my team. Like, what are the kind of tangibly, like, what are those things that they're saying, cause I feel like that's kind of counterintuitive. I thought I would think maybe if I was, that's why I don't manage developers, but I would think that maybe I would try to really sell you on, oh, Drew, you like plaid shirts. My app is great for people that like plaid. You're going to love that. Like, I feel like I would try to go like personal with it and try to enroll you into the app. But you guys are kind of saying not so, it doesn't have, you don't have to be bought into the idea so much. So
I'm super curious how many people here have been super, super bought in and had been given enough vision by a project manager to have that persuade you.
So you're asking who's been persuaded or who's been bought into an app idea?
Not necessarily bought into an app idea, but like I think when a founder comes up to you, you can get bought in on the vision. But I think a lot of us, and this is a big assumption, are mainly dealing less with the client and more of the project manager. And if the project manager doesn't have the ability to cascade the vision onto everybody else working on the project, like most developers are just kind of there, like built working on something and are doing it for like the passion for development, less with less in the vision. Does that make sense?
I have
Or I
like
feel
an
like
interesting take on, being bought into like either the project or the idea that you're building. And it's gotten me in trouble at like a job interview before because I'd be like more interested in building like some kind of like aggregated marketplace platform or something like, or even working on something like Kayak for like travel, more so than I'd be interested in working for like a mattress startup online. The development can be just as complicated, but I'd be more interested in doing something that enriches people's lives a little bit more.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and this is for Richard. Do you ever like an app? Because I feel like you only deal with the problems of an app. Like, do you ever actually get to enjoy it? Like, I feel like Richard he's like the baggage claim person that always has to deal with the lost baggage. Nobody has a good day when we have to talk to you, Richard. So tell me like your experience on like getting bought in on an app, because you just have to deal with all the bugs, right?
Yeah. If the client believes and has a vision of his product, and we as developers feel that and believe in what they are building, I think that it makes the process go easier. I also have to like run different approaches to make sure that the app doesn't crash. And I think that being in a position where you can picture the user using the app and make sure that it's valuable to him, I think it's really rewarding.
Yeah, it feels really good because you have to think like the user and you have to put yourself in the user's shoes, which I feel like probably a lot of times as developers, you guys probably kind of step out of it and think in code, whereas sometimes stepping out and thinking of this person's actually going to use it, what's their experience going to be, that UX is something that's kind of really, really kind of important, I'm sure.
I have a question on when it comes to building. So more detail is always better. You don't necessarily need to be bought into the app idea so much as having the direction and things like that. That's kind of cool. But changes do happen, right, with an app all the time. What's an example of something where, and Austin and Jesse, I know I've had this exact conversation with you where I'm like, hey, just real quick, can we just move this over to here or change the order of this? And you guys are like, dude, it is not that simple.
Can you just build this real quick? It should be simple, right?
Just real quick, real quick.
Just real quick. Yeah. And that's go ahead, Shane. Sorry.
I was going to say, what's the last thing you guys have worked on where, the client or, whoever you're working on thought, oh, this would be a really fast thing and ended up being way more complicated than it would seem?
I mean, there's lots of instances like that, right? Where, where ideas are going to change. And it's very easy to look at something and be like, kind of similar to what Austin had said with the button thing, where like, it's like, oh, it's just a page. It's just moving some field. It's just a drag and drop. That's it. It's easy. When in actuality, it's not that. I had some instances before where customers are like, oh, it's just the front end. Most of the time, it's not. There's a lot of changes to the backend that need to happen as well. All that data processing, no matter what you're doing, those need to change in order to fit the new need for the page. So I see a lot of those instances where they think it's, it just fixed this front end thing, fixed the way it looks. And it's not just it. You have to go back in and really retool that back end and figure out what don't I need? Because if you're going to keep refactoring the same thing, you're going to have this very bloated mess of code that is going to be slow, not functional. So you got to go back in and really take out that stuff that's not necessary, as well as adding in the functionality, which I feel is not accounted for a lot of the time.
So even if somebody wants 2 pages, it goes 1, 2, 3, and they want it 1, 3, 2, there might be a whole set of logic or something in the back end that makes it a lot more difficult than just saying, oh, right, put this first.
Okay. And it depends on the framework too. I've gone through a lot of different frameworks and different types of web development, and it changes definitely depending on what you're using. So
And I think, I don't know, it's also very dependent on how something's like architected. Like in an ideal world, if everything was architected perfectly, like I feel like going in and doing stuff like that would be like a normal thing. But in my experience, a lot of projects aren't built that way. And so it's just a lot of moving stuff around, a lot of retooling, like Marcus said. And I think one of the funniest things is when somebody's like, hey, I want to like retheme my entire app in code. I'm like, oh my gosh. I was like, it's like it's super funny. It sounds like such a simple thing to just go change the colors of like the buttons, the text, and whatever else. But it's like there's 400 screens in this damn thing, and I've got to go change every single one of them. And it's so funny because some developers will be like, well, if you built it right, like that'd be easy. And I'm like, no, like, what are the odds that your global stuff that you have everywhere is built perfectly in the exact same way throughout the entire app? Like zero. It's just a ton of work. And so it's always funny to hear people say that.
I think that also lends to the framework thing I was talking about. Did you have someone that might have worked in React ever since it came out and they're like, it's easy, just change it. But what if I just hop to a new framework and I've been working with it for a year? It's hard to build out that perfect code scheme if you're getting used to something new. Definitely.
I think I'd say one of the things that people ask for that should be easy because they're not used to code, they're used to other things, is I'll hear copy paste a lot. And it will be like, oh, well, it already exists on this page. I mean, just copy from here, paste it over there. We need a new page, but it's going to look exactly like this one. So copy paste. And I think they use that a lot, understanding that maybe they've used a word processor or something similar a lot. And it's not the same thing. Code doesn't just copy paste. Pages don't just copy paste from one place to another.
It's super funny. We legit had somebody come to us and be like, dude, can't you just go copy like this entire app, like Square app online? Can't you just like find the code base and just copy and paste it and like have it? And I'm like, no. Like you can't do that.
First off, lawsuits. Second off, it doesn't work like that. So if you're listening as a founder and you think in these things, because it's very common, like, listen, it's a lot more complicated than you think. And that's why these guys do what they do and they do it really well, is it can be a lot more. I mean, we have people like, hey, Austin, we just need to change a couple of videos and a couple of pictures and then just kind of change a little bit of the theme. Should be really simple, right? And Austin's like, first off, I don't know what your code looks like. It's not all uniform. It's not like a drag and drop. This isn't Weebly, like, and I think that we get that all the time. So as you're listening, like, know that the development and honestly, it comes down to cost too. Like when you design something and you want to move a button or you want to change a color, it's pretty easy in a design feature, right?
Yeah, in a design platform.
Yeah, but if you want to go into a development, which you're both, right? But once you want to change that into a development code, that's significantly different than a design. I think we just need to think differently on that for sure.
I think what's something that's super funny too is when people say, kind of going back to like the copy and paste thing, and this is just something that I want to hit for everybody. It's like, just because we built something in the past doesn't necessarily mean we can copy and paste it. But really what you're paying for at that point isn't the copy and paste, but the actual experience that we've had on that specific thing. So it's like, cool, the first time it took me to build this took, 15 hours. But because I have built it before, because I have thought through all of the edge cases, now I can maybe do it in 7. And that's what you're paying for. So it's not going to be a simple copy paste and be done in 3 seconds. But because we've been through the process before, in theory, we should be able to do it faster. That's not always true, but sometimes it is. And that's what you're paying for and getting.
Richard, just to come full circle on this copy paste, big changes. Hey, this should be easy. This ends up taking a long time. Have you ever found going through QA, have you ever found problems with an app where it's maybe it's ready to go and they're like, hey, we want to publish this thing to the App Store, and you find something that's just like catastrophic and you have to the team has to go back and rewrite a lot of different things? Or
we usually try different approaches to make sure that an app works great before releasing to beta testing or to production. So at that point, we make sure that all the big bugs or all the big issues are solved. So that way, the client doesn't have big errors that is going to be like a big issue to fix. So basically, whenever we add a new feature or whenever we get a requirement done, we run a lot of testing just to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Well, that's interesting. Jesse, what do you wish that these founders who are listening, what do you wish people knew before they came and talked to you and spoke to you? Like, what do you wish they had? What knowledge, like when you have someone that comes to you, you're just like, man, this person has no idea. What's something that you think of and you wish people knew before coming to developers like yourself?
A constant issue that I've run into and experienced is like the timeline, especially since I'm working on the front end. A lot of times I can make it look like the app development is moving really quickly, because if we need a page and we need a button, I can build it and it can be there, but it's not necessarily going to work. So the timeline's really like doubled, sometimes tripled, to get the back end caught up with everything that we're building on the front end. And sometimes that'll look like I didn't get anything done in a week. So I feel like if there is a better understanding of the timeline that it takes, especially when you're working with another team member, I think that would probably be my number one wish, is that there was just like this general understanding that there's a lot of moving pieces, and just because you can see one of them, that is not your like progress tracker for the app.
That's really good, because as a non-technical founder, I see it. I see that it's there, but it doesn't work. Why can't you just make it work? But you wish people knew that there's way more than just building a button. There's connecting all those, which Jaden, I'm sure that you've seen that, right? Because you've done back-end development. You kind of see that, but like, would you agree that's something that's a really big miscommunication or big black box for non-technical people?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jesse's absolutely right there. It comes down to there's a lot of different moving streams at the same time to build an app, whether that's back end, front end, database, security, whatever that ends up being. And it comes back to, you can't have too much design, because the more detail you have at the beginning of your project, then you can know what those promises should look like between front end and back end, what data like Jesse's going to need from the back end, so we can start preparing that. If we kind of do things on the fly, or we just say, we'll just build it as we think of it, we can build the front end based on the conversation with the client, but then only after that can we start working on the back end to fill that with actual live data. So the more we have conversations and actual detail up front, the more we can start those streams at the same time. Otherwise, they're going to just be piled up end to end, and it's going to take significantly longer.
That's a good distinction too. I think that's actually interesting to know when you should start. I wanted to ask when you should start front end versus back end versus anything in the middle. But one question before that pops up is I totally get what you guys are saying. And Jesse, I totally get what you're saying of like, hey, there's a lot that you might not see, or, I might be working on something that might not be functional, that kind of thing. But for anyone that's a non-technical founder, I don't think it's smart for them just to say, hey, cool. All right, Jesse, let's get going. Come talk to me in 6 months. Right. So I think it is smart for that person to manage the process, but what's the best way for someone to manage something that they don't know much about? Right. So if there is 4 months worth of just back end coding of just different things that have to stack up, what would be your ideal way to work with the founder in some kind of accountability or some kind of way to know that those things are moving forward? Because, we've all heard from our clients too, we've all heard those horror stories of people that say, hey, I spent $50K with this group and, or with this solo dev, and he told me he was working on it for 6 months, and then turns out nothing actually was getting done. Right. So what's the balance between not having somebody, trying to have to do the dog and pony show every single week for a client, but also having the right level of accountability that you can check in and say, hey, these things are happening. You guys have any ideas on how to manage that?
So this is super funny, and I deal with this all the time. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to flip the script on you. And basically what it all comes down to is having clear expectations up front. Like, no matter what, this is going to happen. Like, we can try and put processes in place as a product manager and make it so there is something to show you every single week. But at the end of the day, there's not. And all we can do as developers is try and educate you as the client better. Like, because at the end of the day, it takes as long as it takes. And like, there's no way of dealing with that. No amount of money that you can throw at it is going to put you as a founder in the perfect spot. But instead of having clear expectations, by setting clear expectations up front, like, hey, there are going to be times where you don't see anything. I'm going to do my best to make sure, hey, there is something to show you. I'm going to let you know what's going on. I'm going to let you know what problems there are. But like, that's an impossible problem to get around. So basically what I've been trying to do to really just fix this is I actually wait to show features to clients for about 2 weeks. So we're actually about 2 weeks behind on what's actually done. And that's typically worked for most cases. And so that's a process we do on the back end to make sure that there's usually something to show every single week. But again, there are cases where that's not true. And so I think that's the whole point of this podcast too, is to let the founders know that there is going to be a point where you think nothing got done, but in all reality, it's a crap ton of work to process that payment in Stripe, to update something in the server, and to reflect it on the mobile app. Like something like that can take weeks, right? And so it's just having that clear expectation from the very beginning that stuff takes time. We're going to communicate with you every week, and go from there.
I think it's perfect. Yeah, the transparency. Even if you're kind of showing, I mean, that's the reason we have like ticketing systems, right? So they can see, oh, hey, here's these issues we're having, and keep track of it on their own accord. Really kind of follow the pipeline of some of those things. I do think to a certain extent, I don't think they need to know like if this small feature needs to be changed. But yeah, just that transparency, I really think is something key between developers and founders.
Let me ask, so how long is too long without seeing anything? Maybe that's another way to ask it. Like if I hired a guy on Upwork,
what point is a red flag?
Yeah, I hired a guy on Upwork. I just wired him $20,000. Now it's been 8 weeks. I haven't seen a single thing. Should I be scared?
We've found a pretty good balance in 2 weeks. Our 2-week sprints are a good time to show people, and that doesn't always mean showing them front end. I mean, we try to keep a pretty open and honest conversation with our clients that it's not always going to be a demo that we're going to put on your phones. It's going to be, maybe we're showing you our database models. We're just walking you through the ERDs and telling you what your data looks like, or we're walking you through an AWS instance. We're showing you the infrastructure, how it works, how to maintain it, what the accounts look like, and just taking them along for the ride more than anything else, because it's a journey and a winding path, I guess I could say. The whole process itself, you're making new decisions every couple of weeks. And if you don't reach out to them often enough, they may not recognize all of the curves in that path, and they would make an assumption that it's been a straight line. And oftentimes that can lead to miscommunications where like, oh, you started at point A and got to point B. Why didn't it take you way longer? Or way shorter? Why didn't it take you way less money? All this stuff. But if you can show them all the curves in the road because you're meeting with them consistently, they'll be a much better partner in the long run.
Guys, what kind of parting advice would you give to us simpletons, Shane and I, as we're building an app where we don't know? What simple advice would you just want them to know or give them as they're starting their journey?
I would say consider this process more as an art form than a machine, and consider the fact that we are building this as partners with you. It's not you're handing your code on a punch card into a machine to just then spit out a result. It's an art form, it's a process, and it's something that we're working on as a partnership together. So the more we work together, the more we communicate, and the more we can get that up front, the better.
I think something that's also super important for everybody to understand is like the plan that you have in your head is just not going to work. It's just as hard to start a business as it is to build an app, as I think what I'm trying to get across to people. Mm-hmm. Because starting a business is hard. Things are always changing. Something breaks. Like nobody starts a successful business and was like, oh, that was easy. And I think that's what founders have in their head is like, I'm going to start to create this app or this website and it's going to get done and I'm going to make money. But there's just so much work that goes into all of it. There are going to be cases where you run over budget. There's going to be cases where timelines are missed. And like, unfortunately, that's like life. That's just how it goes. And the only thing that we can really do is to make your life easier is to be transparent. So don't get mad at me for missing a budget when you didn't hit your numbers for your email list last month, right? Like I should hold you accountable just for that because my success is just as dependent on your success as a founder. So it's funny. That's just how the see sales, I guess.
Mm.
I'd say my like parting advice would be to make sure, like, if you want to build an app, you need to make sure that you know what the goal of the app is. It gets really blurred and like, oh man, I like saw this app and it had this really cool feature. And it's like, well, does that actually have anything to do with what you're trying to accomplish?
The problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah, because people are excited. People are excited to build an app and get it going. And a lot of times you'll lose sight of like what that end goal is. Jaden mentioned there being like a lot of curves in that path, and a lot of people want it to be like a straight line, but a lot of times I feel like clients or anyone wanting to build an app, they're like, oh, it'd be cool to add this like curve. Like it'd also be cool if we could do that. And then that excitement can almost it's kind of like going to a buffet and like taking a little bit of like everything instead of just what you can actually eat.
I would just add on what Jesse said. Knowing your audience is like a huge part of building an app, and having a clear idea and on how it's going to look like, how it's going to work, and how beneficial it's going to be to people. I think that's important.
Yeah, I mean, kind of shifting the tone a little bit, I would say talk to your devs. I mean, you sure you want to run through the project manager a lot, but we geek out when you ask us to explain how something works. You know what I mean? I love whenever someone asks me, "Oh, hey, how's this functioning? Can you explain it to me?" And not necessarily that you need to know how everything works. I mean, there's a lot of working pieces. But if you want to know that stuff and you feel it would be valuable for you to learn, don't be afraid to ask. I think a lot of developers are definitely willing to kind of just jump in it and show you how it works because we're excited about that stuff. I mean, it's what we do all day, and
you
I
built
love
it. It's
it.
your baby.
Exactly. Yeah. So you wanna show how it works. So definitely, I would say have a conversation for sure. I think that's always a good thing to do.
That's awesome. And then I also want to add, have your budget, and then probably want to double it, whatever it is, because it makes life way easier. Because if you want what you want, right? Isn't it awesome? Didn't we talk to guys? Says, yeah, someone told me that when it comes down to fundraising for development, ask for double what you think you need.
Yeah, it's like whatever the developer quoted, you go raise twice as much.
Yep. So, well, cool guys. I appreciate you guys coming on. Jaden, tell our listeners where they can find you, kind of where you guys can be found and your information.
Yeah, for sure. So myself, Richard, and Marcus representing Accelerate Development. That's spelled XLR and then the number 8. And we're excited to be here and chat with you guys, talk more about development, but find us on LinkedIn or acceleratedev.com.
Cool. And then the other devs was part of Stride. So we have a few of us on here as well. So awesome. I think the conversation was great, especially for someone that's a non-technical, like me and Shane. I felt like this was a lot of fun, just like, shooting the breeze with guys that know way more than us, which is usually every day of my life. But you guys have been awesome.
A good job not rolling your eyes too when we were asking questions. So we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Just want to say thanks again, Marcus, Richard, and Jaden for jumping on with us. So,
Very cool. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Awesome.